What if I told you a supergroup stacked with talent from Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath was torn apart by a manager who allegedly tried to blackmail them using the lead singer's secret fatal illness? They had a sound that was pure, blues-soaked, Zeppelin-style rock and roll gold, a guitarist who was a certified legend, and a singer with a voice that could shake stadiums. But backstage, it was a toxic mess of fistfights, public humiliation, and a record label that would eventually try to erase them from existence. Here's how the Badlands train wreck happened.
Like, subscribe. Thank you.
So Jake Healy's out in the cold. It's 1987. He's just been unceremoniously dumped from Ozzy Osbourne's band, the band he helped write monster hits for, like Bark at the Moon, The Ultimate Sin, and so forth. He was a guitar hero, a guy who had replaced the ghost of Randy Rhoads, and now he's out on his ass with a reputation for being a little bit difficult. So Jake is back in Los Angeles and he wants to start his own thing, something real, something different from the hairspray and spandex scene that was choking the Sunset Strip. He wanted to get back to his roots, to the heavy bluesy thunder of bands like Free and Led Zeppelin. So he starts looking around for the right guys, a real band of brothers. And that's where he connects with these two dudes, Ray Gillen and Eric Singer, who had just done a cup of coffee with Black Sabbath. Ray Gillen was the singer, and he wasn't just any singer. The guy was a force of nature. He had some plant vibes, could totally wail, insane charisma, and a voice that could go from a soulful whisper to a full-blown scream in no time at all. Eric Singer was a powerhouse drummer. And they get a bass player, Greg Chasin, who had actually auditioned for Ozzy's band years earlier and knew Jake. The four of them get in a room and it just clicks. They call themselves Badlands. The sound is raw, stripped down, and it's got soul. This wasn't the happy party time rock you heard on the radio. This music had a darker, more somber vibe, a wintry atmosphere that felt more like trudging through a gray frozen landscape than cruising down a sunny California highway. Music with dirt under its fingernails, built on Jake's heavy, groove-oriented riffs and a rhythm section that was locked in, tight but never flashy. And they looked the part too. No Aquanet, lipstick, or neon scarves. It was all denim, leather, and boots. Badlands gave off a vibe of being serious, authentic musicians who would rather be in a dusty rehearsal room perfecting a groove than posing for photos. So they get a deal with Atlantic Records, and in 1989 they dropped their first album, self-titled Masterpiece. To get their sound, Jake relied on a beautifully simple setup. He plugged his main axe, a white Fender Strat, with a Charvel neck that fans called Whitey, straight into a Boss OD1 overdrive pedal, and then into a wall of roaring Marshall JCM 800s. These weren't stock amps, they were hot-rodded by a legendary amp guru named Jose Arredondo, the same guy who worked on Eddie Van Halen's gear. And the tone was unmistakable. It wasn't super saturated, high-gain fizz of his peers. It was this warmer, crunchier, more organic sound that let the wood of the guitar and the heat of the tubes breathe. The perfect vehicle for his unique playing style, a blend of bluesy phrasing, unorthodox scales, and this swaggering rhythm that was instantly recognizable. And the album itself, not a massive chart-topping smash, but it does respectably well, hitting number 57 on the Billboard charts. Critics love it, and the videos for Dreams in the Dark and Winter's Call actually get played on MTV. Badlands go on tour, opening for bands like Great White, Tesla. It seems like they're on their way. Definitely the real deal in what would be considered a sea of fakes. But even on that first tour, cracks were starting to show. Jake was the quiet, intense leader who wrote the music. Ray was the flamboyant, life-of-the-party frontman. And their ideas for what the band should be started to clash. After the tour, Eric Singer was out. He says he was fired. Jake says he quit. Whatever the case, he goes on to join Kiss, so he did all right for himself. They replace him with Jeff Martin and head back in the studio to make their second album, Voodoo Highway. And this is where the trouble really starts to brew. The album is even more bluesy and raw than the first one. Killer record. But it's not what the label or even what Ray Gillen wanted. Ray was pushing for more of a commercial sound, something that would sell millions and make them huge stars. Jake wasn't having any of it. He was an artist, and he refused to compromise that vision. And the tension between the two of them was getting thick enough to cut with a knife. Things got worse. On top of the creative differences, Ray was starting to look a bit sick. He was getting really thin. The band thought that he was partying too hard, living the rock star lifestyle. Nobody knew the truth, or at least almost nobody. According to Jakey Lee, the manager, a guy named Paul O'Neill, found out what was really going on. Ray had been hospitalized with pneumonia, and the blood work came back with a diagnosis nobody wanted to hear in the early 90s, HIV. The story goes that O'Neill, instead of being supportive, saw an opportunity. The relationship between Jake and Ray had completely broken down. They were barely speaking, and Jake was ready to just can Ray from the band. So O'Neill allegedly goes to Jake and tries to blackmail him. He says something to the effect of, "You can't fire Ray because if you do, I'll go to the record label and tell him what he has, and they'll drop you." Jake was stunned. So he goes to Ray and tells him what the manager just tried to do. He asks Ray straight up if it's true, if he's sick. Ray denies it, says O'Neill is lying, tells Jake to fire the manager anyway. So Jake does. He fires Paul O'Neill. And what happens next is the stuff of music industry nightmares. O'Neill, true to his alleged threat, calls up the head of Atlantic Records and tells them about Ray's illness. And suddenly, all the tour money support for Voodoo Highway vanishes. The label basically puts the album on ice and pulls the plug on any promotion. They were being screwed, and it felt like it was all because of one phone call. So Greg Chasen, bass player, has a slightly different take. He says it wasn't about Ray's health, but about a massive falling out the band had with the label for other reasons. But whatever the exact cause, the result was still the same. Badlands was dead in the water at Atlantic. So the band, against all odds, decides to honor a tour that they have booked in the UK. But by this point, Jake and Ray could not stand each other. Before they even left, Jake did an interview with the big British rock magazine Kerrang! And basically announced that Ray was out of the band and would be replaced after the tour. He didn't even tell Ray he was doing it. Ray found out by reading it in the magazine, just like everybody else. So they get to the UK. The tour is an absolute disaster of bad vibes, open hostility. It all comes to a head at their show at the London Astoria on July 2nd, 1992. In the middle of the set, Ray Gillen, the charismatic frontman, stops the show. He pulls out a copy of that very Kerrang! Magazine, holds it up for the entire audience to see, and says into the microphone, "There are two sides to every story." Across the stage, Jake is just mouthing the words, "It's all true." This was a jaw-dropping moment of public self-destruction. The most amazing part? The review said that they still put on a hell of a show that night, powered almost by pure animosity. So as soon as the tour from hell was over, Ray was officially canned. It was the end. Drake tried to keep the band going. He hired a new singer named John West, and they started writing and recording demos for our third album, but the magic just wasn't there. The industry was changing as well. Grunge was exploding out of Seattle. Bands that looked and sounded like Badlands were suddenly considered dinosaurs. With no label support and the internal drama having reached its peak, Atlantic finally dropped them in '93. The band just fell apart. The recordings with John West were shelved, and everybody went their own separate ways. Ray Gillen, however, didn't stop making music. He formed a new project called Sun Red Sun with guys from Alice in Chains and Black Sabbath, but he was fighting a losing battle. The illness that he had denied to his bandmates was definitely taking its toll, and on December 1st, 1993, Ray Gillen died at his home in Jersey from AIDS-related complications. He was only 34 years old. His death was a tragedy, not just for his friends and family, but for the rock world, who had lost one of its most unique and powerful voices. It also slammed the door forever on any hope of a Badlands reunion. Years later, in 1998, a collection of the last demos they recorded with Ray before the UK tour was released in Japan, called Dusk. It's a raw, unfinished sounding record, basically recorded live in the studio. But in headphones, man, Jake's guitar tone is incredible. You could hear a bit of that frailty in Ray's voice, but that passion was still there. He was still absolutely burning it up. And that album became a holy grail for fans, a glimpse into what could have been. And it actually makes Badlands now one of rock's greatest what-if stories. They had the songs, the talent, and the authenticity to be massive, to be mentioned in the same breath as the 70s giants that they were worshipping. But instead, they burned out in a blaze of drama, sickness, and industry politics. Jake Lee eventually came back with his own band, Red Dragon Cartel, and they played Badlands songs in their set, keeping that legacy alive. But the original band remains a perfect, tragic snapshot of a moment in time when four incredibly talented guys came together, made lightning in a bottle, only to watch it all shatter on the floor.